Hello and welcome back to Breaking the Consensus here at Protect Life. I'd like to thank you for joining us again tonight. And before we get into the meat of the evening, I'd like to first ask you if you could just click on the old subscribe button there. Make sure you keep up to date with new content that we're generating for you out there. Also, you see there is a donate button there. We know we can't get out to do the meetings that we would normally have to make contact with our many supporters across the country. So if you can hit the donate button, I think you can, we can promise you will be used carefully and well to further the causes that we hold close to our heart. So tonight we are talking with Richard Casey, and we're talking about a subject which I know is very close to a lot of people's hearts, is a concern about children and their education. Um, so first up, before we kick off, Richard, could you just give us a little bit of sense of Richard Casey, who he is, and how he's got to where we are today, as it were?
Perfect. Thanks very much, Michael, and thanks very much for having me on as well. I appreciate it. So I'm a primary school teacher, and as some people may be aware, I'm now starting off a new private classical school in Limerick City this coming September 2022. I've been teaching now for 10 years. I've been teaching in Catholic schools for the bones of the 10 years, bar a couple of months abroad where I taught as well. And so I have a good experience in teaching in general, and also in teaching in Catholic schools. I've also just finished up doing a master's in Christian leadership and education as well. And so I just finished that up last year, and I wrote up my master's on on a review of the NCCA's new RSE proposals. So I know that that's, as you mentioned, this is a topic that's very close to people's hearts, the education of children. And I know that RSE and the importance of safeguarding children's innocence and safeguarding children in general is very important to parents' hearts as well. So that's something that I'm very much in tune with, and that as I said, I just wrote up my thesis on that there. So I'm very much involved in Catholic education circles. I've been a member of the Association of Catholic Teachers for a number of years as well. We send out a monthly bulletin with resources for teachers and for other interested people who are involved in Catholic education, and various other Catholic education groups over the last number of years. I've really began to network well with people, and I've just seen a growing demand for a good new independent school which provides Catholic education to be started. And so that's where Stella Maris Primary School then has come into play. I know that parents are looking for it. I know that many other people who are involved in Catholic education have been seeking this, and so that's now why we're starting this new school coming in September.
Okay, so I know a lot of quite a number of people, friends and family members who are primary school teachers in schools under Catholic patronage throughout the country, who take their vocation as teachers and teachers within the schools with the Catholic ethos very seriously. But you obviously feel that there's something within the system which is beyond problematic at the moment, that for you to make this fairly radical shift or decision. I mean, what is it? You said you studied the NCCA. What is it you see within the system now, the new that you think represents a real problem for parents with who want their children to have Catholic schools? And also, this is two big questions, I suppose. Also, to what extent do you think parents are aware of what's happening in the school? First of all, what do you think the problems are, and to the extent that parents know that's actually what's going on?
Yeah, well, as you said there's good people throughout the country, thank God, who are involved in Catholic education. As I said, I'm involved in a number of groups who are supporting good Catholic education, and they're doing great work, and thank God for them. I suppose regarding what you're saying in the grand scheme of things, and in looking at the picture in its entirety, Ireland, as you're aware, is increasingly growing more secular and liberal, and so that's in society in general. So that has an impact then in the schools. So when you have good Catholic teachers, good Catholic students, good Catholic parents in the Catholic schools, and they're doing their best to do what they can in promoting the faith, in promoting faith in Jesus Christ and love of God, and living a good moral life, but it becomes more difficult then as society becomes more secularized, because you have more teachers who aren't following the faith, who don't believe in the faith. They may be teaching it, but it's hard to teach the Catholic faith well when you don't believe it yourself. And same with principals in the schools. Many good principals out there, but again, they're facing these problems then of society in general, and so therefore more teachers and more parents and more students now having secular and liberal beliefs rather than Catholic beliefs. So that's the first thing that it makes it difficult for good parents, good teachers, good students who are trying to live out their faith in those schools. It makes it hard for them. But then regarding the system itself, as you know, the government finances the schools in this country, and so therefore they have a large part to play in the curriculum that is taught in our schools. So we mentioned the NCCA there, the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment. They proposed a curriculum that's taught in the schools across the country that are financed by the government. So in areas now like RSE, in areas like well-being, and in the new primary draft framework which the NCCA has written up, we see some important areas, Michael, that are I suppose not just problematic, but would send alarm bells ringing for parents who are very concerned about their children's education. So if we just start with the primary draft, the draft primary net framework being drafted by the NCCA. In that, there was a piece written by, I think it was a lecturer in Mary I, perhaps it was Dan O'Connell, who wrote about the draft framework written by the NCCA, and he was just speaking about the fact that it's giving no mention of the spiritual education of the child in its philosophy now at the start. It's just completely left out. So you're talking about very much right from the offset, from the philosophy that's set out at the start of that framework, a secular education being provided. It's not referencing God. It's not referencing Christ in any way, obviously. And so it's not referencing anything to do with the promotion of the Catholic faith, or even spirituality in general for even other people of other religions. It's just not mentioned at all. So that's very alarming. We see in the draft primary framework that religious education, the term had been changed to patrons program. So just even little changes like that, they don't seem like much, but it's the change of terms from religious education, which was providing for the religious nourishment of the child, and to help the child to grow in their religion in that spiritual sense, now being referred to as the Patience Program. So it just becomes again more secularized, the term religion being removed, and also the time being brought from 2.5 hours down to 2 hours, to the best of my knowledge as well. So just a reduction in time there. And then at the same time, you see the increase of a time. Again, this is obviously a draft framework. The last time I was looking at this, the proposed time then for a new subject of well-being being introduced was, a couple of hours, maybe perhaps 3 hours, and so you see a new philosophy, and you see a new way of looking at life being proposed here by the NCCA. Well-being kind of almost looking like a replacement for religion in the way that it's being put across here, and that would go largely with the culture that we're living in now, Michael, as you know, that in lots of ways religion is being pushed out of public life further and further, and things such as the notions of well-being being used to replace that, and well-being really referring to here our material well-being. It can refer to things like spiritual well-being again, but not as we understand them as Catholics. It's more the introduction of things like mindfulness and yoga, if there's going to be any kind of spirituality which are not in keeping with the Catholic faith. So it's a removal again of the Catholic faith from its position in education, and the introduction of this understanding of material well-being, physical well-being, in ways that aren't ordered towards God and towards our Catholic faith. And then as well as that, obviously the very important one, which I think most people are concerned about, is the RSE recommendations. So as I said there, I wrote my thesis up on that, and I reviewed the NCCA's recommendations in light of Catholic teaching. And so the end result, after all those thousands of words of writing, basically the result of it is that the NCCA's recommendations are not in keeping with the Catholic faith. They are very much rooted in a secular and liberal understanding of the human person, and in a secular and liberal understanding of life. So there's no reference again to God, to the Catholic faith, to our morality. It's all very much removed, and it becomes centered on man himself, his own desires, and not without any reference to God and to our objective purpose in life and our natural end in life. So there's a lot of talk in that, in the NCCA's proposals, of things to do with teachings about sexuality, which just are not in keeping with the Catholic faith, and which will harm children, and it will mislead them, and it will lead to much hurt in the future if those proposals are followed. And I know that that's something that's very, very alarming to parents, and they need to take it very seriously, because if you want your child to be given a good Catholic education, you couldn't allow them to be taught RSC as it's proposed by the NCCA, and then as it could be interpreted as well. Obviously, these things, you can interpret them again in light of the Catholic faith, but by and large, the way that they've been written up and proposed, they would be very easily interpreted in a very liberal sense, in a way that would not be in keeping with our Catholic faith and with our Catholic morality. And I know
So,
that then, sorry, Michael, go on.
no, sorry, so if a parent was to walk into your school when it's up and running, how, in what way will they notice that they're in a school which is substantially different to the one that their child previously was in? How what will be the specific or particular shape or form of the education that they're receiving that they are getting now?
Yeah, well, I suppose you're talking about a whole philosophy of education being different, really, Michael. So the way that they would encounter that could be in 100 different things throughout the day. So if you want to talk about education in general, first of all, we have to think about what education is. So education itself comes from the Latin term educare, which means to lead out or to lead towards. So that naturally begs the question, where are we leading children towards? So if you were to walk into our school in Stella Maris Primary School, then if you were to observe throughout the day the teaching and the interactions of various teachers with the students, then I think you would very much understand, and you would recognize and appreciate that the education in Stella Maris Primary School is aimed at helping the child to know and to love and to serve God better in this world, and to help the child to ultimately achieve ultimate happiness with God forever in the next life. It will be clear through what we teach, in the way that it's taught, in the conversations that are had with the children, and in how we celebrate and how we pray throughout the day. So, as you're saying, if you're to compare it to let's say to a teacher who does not have the same Catholic beliefs, or who doesn't believe in the importance of a classical education, or you'd see it in the makeup of the classroom. You'd see it in, are there religious images around the room? Is the work of the children appreciated in regards to the teaching of their religion? Is it given pride of place in the room? And also the atmosphere of the room. So I know that as Catholics we're called to live out our lives with the fruits of the Spirit should be clearly manifest in our lives as well. So walking into the classroom, one would feel the atmosphere of the Catholic faith being lived out, one of love, one of joy, one of peace, one of patience, that they should be
When
able to. Yeah.
when you say a classical education, uh, are we? What do you mean? Will there be will the curriculum, in a sense, be different, other than obviously the time or the emphasis that's placed on religious education or whatever? Will the actual core, if you like, the other core elements of the curriculum be different?
Yeah, well, when you're talking about a classical education, I think the best reference points for somebody to find out about it who hasn't heard about it before would be to read Dorothy Sayers' essay, The Lost Tool of Learning. So back in the 20th century, she wrote this essay just lamenting modern education as it became more secularized, as it became more modern, basically, and moved away from the classical form of education as it was taught throughout the medieval period and even up into the later, even into the centuries after that, as it started to peter out, became more modern and became more geared towards being economically productive, etc. So what she speaks about in classical education is that it's the orientation of the education that's the main thing. Classical education aims at educating a child in virtue and in wisdom. That's the end of the education. It's teaching you how to think well and how to think logically. It's not just about equipping you with knowledge and skills. That's an important part of education, but it's not the end of education. It's not just to gear you towards being an economically productive member of society, and then you're free to do whatever else you want in your life. But it's to really teach you about the purpose of life, and then to help you to grow into virtue and in wisdom as well. And that's, as Aristotle has taught, that's ultimately where our happiness comes from. It's from growing in virtue. So it's referring, Michael, to the education as classically proposed, let's say in Roman and Greek civilization, and then especially as taught in medieval society. So it's that orientation that's very important. As well as that, as well, then it recognizes and appreciates the natural levels of development, Michael, throughout a child's education, just as they progress naturally throughout their childhood into adolescence. So by that, what I mean is that she sets up 3 ages of the classical education, as I said, was taught during the medieval period, and those are grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So up
Mhm.
to about the age of about 8, you're really teaching the fundamentals of reading, writing, arithmetic, and of course we would say as Catholics as well, religion. Those fundamental 4 R's being taught to the children and taught well to them, as well as all the other subjects, being taught in the various ways. But really, you're really teaching those 4 well to help the children just to be able to read and write so they can engage with material. Then in the grammar stage, that's the real first stage of classical education. You're talking about from about 9 years old to about 11. So in around third to fifth class. Again, obviously it depends on the child. You know yourself, Michael, that people develop at different levels themselves, but that's just broadly speaking, that's the way she laid it out. So in that stage, she said that children naturally love observing, and they love memorizing and repeating things. So it's the perfect age to teach them grammar, where you're teaching all those grammatical rules to children. So let's say think of Irish, where you're teaching mod, ar, vur, me, tu, she, shin, shiv, she is, all of these things which are easy just to learn. Children are like sponges at that age. They just can learn these things off by heart. And when they've learned these grammatical rules, when they've learned these facts in the various subjects, let's say for like maths, they should be learning their tables off by heart at that stage, so that then they'll have those for the rest of their lives, and so they can move into the next stage of logic, then having this great store of knowledge already accumulated in the age in the area of grammar at that stage. And it's the same then in other subjects, like in religion as well, learning your catechism questions off by heart, because when they've been learned well at that grammar stage, then you'll have that solid bank of information to move on to the area of logic and onto the area of rhetoric in the future. Then Michael, the stage of logic then is next. So you're talking about maybe sixth class up to maybe first or second year, from about 12 to 14 years old. And that's just teaching children how to think well, how to argue well. So both in terms of speaking orally and also writing out arguments. So you're teaching them basically the fundamental principles of logic at that stage. And then finally, it's rhetoric is kind of from 15, 16 years old, teaching them how to eloquently to demonstrate their arguments and to persuade people by their arguments. So that's really the essence of classical education, Michael.
So if somebody was listening to you and they say, well, it sounds like, for example, at the first stage, the stage of grammar, that you would pay. It sounds like you put a lot of emphasis on what would be today called rote learning, and
Yeah.
some people would say that's not a traditional way, but rather a reactionary way of teaching. That this is what would you say to someone who say, well, oh, that's very old-fashioned. We believe that we don't want the sage on the stage We want the guide by the side. This, oh, where children go through this period of discovery, where they're responsible for their own discovery rather than having someone giving them this,
Yeah,
which is very
that's
popular in other schools that are happening now.
absolutely, yeah, you're right, Will. That's very much a popular philosophy of education at the moment. Well, I mean, if Michael, and I think that's especially in regards to some subjects that people propose that philosophy of education, and they specifically, I'd say, they propose it in relation to things like religion, I would say. So if we were to just take that philosophy of education that you just pointed out there now and apply it to something like mathematics. So you're saying to the child, okay, I'm gonna be here beside you now, and I'm not going to teach you, but I'm going to let you discover these things for yourselves. So that might be, let's say, if you're kind of laying out the materials for the building blocks of addition and subtraction, that might be fair enough. But after that, when you're getting into more complex, areas of teaching, the child, if you don't teach them fundamental facts, the child won't be able to discover those by themselves. It's just not going to happen as plainly as if you actually taught the child the fact itself. It's even more so, as I said, in relation to things like religion. If you're just going to say to the child that they can come up with things themselves, they can discover things themselves, well, then how are they ever going to come across God's revelation? God's revelation is something that's revealed by God. It's not something that's discovered by us, by ourselves. It's not a natural product of philosophy or of reasoning or of just contemplating about life. When you're talking about things like revelation, it actually, you have to listen, you have to be open to it, and you have to listen to it being taught by someone else who actually knows the truth about those things. And it's very important then, Michael, so as I said, in things like maths, you have to be able to teach the truths of mathematics. Like, for most of us, as things become more complex, then we just aren't able to discover these things naturally by ourselves. Whilst we have to be taught them, we also have to be guided. We have to be guided in that process by someone who's very, very well able to actually lead you in that process. And so it's the same with things then like history as well. You can't just take a view of history, picking pieces here and there to suit your own ideology, your own philosophy, but you actually have to look at the truths that are out there, and you have to then give those to children, help them to understand them, and help them actually then to understand where they've come from, so that they can better understand the world they live in.
Hey, you said that one of the things you want to help children is to think logically. But when I listen to other people talking about contemporary pedagogies, they talk about we have to teach children to think critically. Um, do you see a conflict there, or that, or or do you think maybe that the idea of teaching critical thinking is a bit of a nonsense in itself? That really this is not something you can teach.
Well, it depends what you mean by critical thinking and by what you mean by the teaching of logic as well. So obviously, logic is referring to being able to think about things reasonably. Do they actually make sense or not? So if you're referring to critical thinking in the same way, just seeing does something actually make sense or not, and obviously critical thinking is a very good thing. If an argument is given to a child and there's a logical fallacy in it, you want them to be able to find that logical fallacy. If somebody's starting off an argument and one of their premises is untrue, you want to teach the child to look at the premises, look at
Mhm.
if there's a logical fallacy in their reasoning as they try to work it out. If they're not properly following the logical form of an argument, you want to teach them about that. So in that sense, every time you look at an argument, you are thinking critically about it, because you're seeing actually whether the premises are true, whether they're reasoning logically, and whether their conclusion has been as is true and as follows from the premises. But in regards, then if you're talking about critical thinking in regards to just being critical of everything and not ever appreciating things, then I think that critical thinking is not to be considered as something.
Mhm.
It depends on the way you think about it and describe it.
Yeah, I think what one criticism I think, which I don't know, would you agree with this, is that critical thinking doesn't make any sense, is impossible without the idea is that you don't give children facts, you just teach them method. But the experience has been that if children don't have facts about something, they can't think critically. Whereas, in fact, if you take any 7-year-old child they can talk pretty critically and intelligently about ice cream because they know about ice cream and they have experience of ice cream and they can be very critical of ice cream. But if it's something they don't have any facts or experience about, they have no capacity. I think the Dutch tried it with history for a while. They didn't teach them any facts. They just taught them this method, and they discovered that they couldn't talk about it without having that basic substratum of information of facts, which maybe was some dates, maybe not as many dates as once upon a time, but you had to have a certain amount of facts, or else children
Yeah.
were just left with nothing. That was trying to build a house with sand.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think that actually fits in very well with what I was just saying there about classical education. Because, as you said, in order to be able to reason, in order to be able to think critically, and critically here understood in the correct sense, then you need to have that bank of facts and that true information to work from. So that's that work that's done at the grammar stage, where they learn these facts and this information, and they have that easily then able to. They're easily able to recollect that, and they're able to refer to that in their arguments. And also then, as we just said as well, with premises as well. If someone's making an argument, and they start with a false premise because they don't have the right information, they don't have the right facts. Well, if you've been taught that properly at the grammar stage, you'll easily be able to look at the flaw and the premise of someone when it comes to logic, when it comes to reasoning. So I think that's a very good point, Michael. And as well on that, I recently read The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. So some of the viewers might be aware of that book. And he just talks about the destructive nature of modern education and destruction of man, basically in the in the uh, in the in the way that the philosophy of the understanding of man has been going in recent centuries, just constantly questioning everything, and questioning the idea of objective reality and objective truth, which ultimately leads to the abolition of man, which is the title of the piece. Because we're rational animals. Again, that's what classical education would teach us. So we need to be able to reason, and in order to do that, then he goes back through in the book. He goes through things that we have to accept as true. These assumptions, which cannot be found by reason alone. If you just work by reason alone, you end up, as Pope Benedict XVI talks about, in your own little dark bunker, where you've locked yourself up in your own reason, in your own mind, because you haven't just opened yourself up to things that are obviously true in life, things that you can't prove true by reason by itself. But it's almost as if, Michael, they're so obvious, and common sense should teach you these things themselves, that if you don't accept these things, then it's impossible to have a logical discussion with someone.
So it's like the axioms, the Aristotelian axioms that you,
Yeah,
cannot be proved, but rather are the basis of all the arguments that follow. So, say
yeah,
for example, you are obviously a convicted uh, Christian, a convicted Catholic, and for you, it's very that your school has not just simply a Catholic ethos, but is in its warp and its weft a Catholic school. But say I'm a parent and I'm thinking, okay, I like the idea of a more traditional pedagogy for my children. I like that. I like the idea of more structure. I think that a lot of the new stuff isn't working. But like you're me, and you went to you were educated by nuns and brothers, and we had prayers before every class, and we had the Christian Brothers Catechism, and we had to learn off who is God, why did God make me, and that, and we had the Angelus, and we had Mass, and we had preparation sacrament. But there was always a sense, ultimately, that the primary locus for catechesis was in the home, the parents. And the school's principal job wasn't catechesis, but education. And I listening to you, and I think, and I'm sure that people who are coming from who are hostile to you will say, "Oh, this is just a Catholic madrasa. This isn't really a school. This is all about indoctrination." Where, do you think that there's a tension between the pedagogy and the catechesis, or the idea that the education will suffer because you're spending too much time on religion? How would you respond to someone saying that?
well, I suppose first of all, when it comes to the kind of the rhetoric that's used regarding things like indoctrination, well, again, you'd have to get into that. You really have to get into that subject just to disprove that you indoctrinate someone in something that's false. So teaching children about the Catholic faith and Catholic education itself isn't indoctrination, because you're not teaching about something that's false. So obviously we could have a big long discussion about that and proving the truth of the Catholic faith, but that would take a number of talks in itself, Michael. But so that's the first thing regarding people who are saying that we just, unless we're to talk about it now and logically speak about our reasonable faith, then we'll just have to I'll just have to state it as true that the Catholic faith is true, and
Um,
therefore when we teach children the Catholic faith, we're doing them a tremendous service, and not doing them any harm, as those people would say.
but would you say there's a, I mean, within the school itself, the pedagogy, do you think, is this going to be a central point of attraction for parents? The idea that it's not just the Catholicism, but it's the nature of of, shall we say, the of the education itself, of the ability of the children, whether it's with Irish or English or grammar, or nature studies, whatever it is, that you're taking a fundamentally different approach to engaging the
Absolutely.
child in education. And for one reason, it's, shall we say, a spiritual or moral reason, but also it's a practical reason. That simply for the perspective of the child, this is a more successful, more engaging way for the child to learn.
Absolutely, yeah, but that's exactly what a classical education does provide for it. It provides them with that solid academic foundation that they wouldn't, we believe in classical education, that they won't receive in an education that isn't classically based. So as I said, yeah, they're through the different stages, the grammar, the logic, the rhetoric. You're talking about forming a child who's able to think and who's able to speak well. And we know certainly, Michael, that we need that very badly in society at the moment, with matters of faith and morals, and regarding the pro-life issue. That the pro-life issue, one could arrive at that by reason alone. That the dignity of the human person could be arrived at through natural law principles. And so if you were just to use your reason alone in that regard, and that's exactly what we hope to do in Stella Maris Primary School, is to teach children how to reason, because that's what we're called to do in our education. We're to teach children how to think well, and then naturally they'll be drawn towards God, and they'll also be drawn towards living good lives and moral lives, and they'll help to actually renew society itself, and to promote the dignity of each human person in society through that.
I think a number of people would look at the results of a number of things in the last few years, and have made the observation that still the majority of children in this country will have gone through an education which was formally Catholic. And yet, when we look at the values of younger people, we look at the polling of how younger people voted, say, in the repeal, the eighth referendum, that what was formerly a Catholic education seems to have left very little effect on them. And that maybe for perfectly good reason, well, not for good reasons, but perfectly benign or decent reasons in some ways, that what started out as a Catholic education became diluted in a way. And this is, in a sense, part of what your vocation is to return to that, because the the basic values have, in some sense, have not been inculcated, and that sense of the depth and the richness of this intellectual tradition has not been communicated to these to children. So they've been sent out a little bit like lambs shorn into the way out into this world, and not prepared. And do you see that, in a sense, that this is part of that you have a vocation to prepare children for a world which is fundamentally hostile?
Yeah, I think that's a very important part of it. As I just said there, a classical education forms children in virtue, so that means the love of the good, and in wisdom, which is the love of the true. So when you teach children to love what is true and love what is good, then you're teaching them to sacrifice their own self-interest, their own comfort, in order to do what is true and in order to do what is right. So it means that they'll
Mhm.
be formed in such a way as to stand up for what is right in any area of life. Let's say, just in particular, you're talking about the referendum there, to stand up for unborn babies, to stand up for the dignity of each and every human person, from every unborn baby to the eldest of people in society, to truly understand the dignity of the human person, that means suffering with someone. It doesn't mean that we're going to, kill the person when they're in suffering, but that we're actually going to help the people to love that person and to be with them. And that can be that's, I suppose, very much taught in our Catholic faith as well. Obviously, we have the ultimate example, who is Christ, who teaches us by his example that suffering is redemptive, that we can offer up our suffering in union with him for the glory of God, and to help save poor souls. And so that's ultimately what our whole education is geared at. And as well there,
So,
Michael, you just, sorry, go on
sorry.
there.
No, I just wondering
Um, yeah.
if you'd want to finish. Sorry, finish. That's interesting. Your point is interesting. I just want to finish it there.
Perfect. You just reminded me of something else important there as well, Michael, which is what's at the very heart of a Catholic education and a Catholic classical education. And it's not just, as Pope Benedict XVI says about the Catholic faith, it's not just a philosophy, it's not just a morality that we're preaching, but it's actually an encounter with a person, the person of Jesus Christ. And you're talking about the values being inculcated in children. But it's I think it's very important for us to acknowledge and to appreciate the fact that the values of the Catholic faith emanate and are derived from Jesus Christ. It's a personal relationship with him. We're not just a philosophy like the Greeks would have had, let's say long ago, a Greek philosophy, and not in relation to divine, and certainly not in relation to a personal God. So I think that's always important for us to come back to. That's exactly what the heart of Catholic education is. It's centered on the person of Jesus Christ.
So, what's the reaction been like? I mean, have you received, shall we say, positive support, or have you maybe slightly less enthusiastic from, if we like, the institutional church? What have you been getting helped? Have you been supported?
Yeah, we thank God. It's been very positive, the reaction so far. Obviously, people uh, people who love Jesus and who love our Catholic faith want to see the Catholic faith well taught, and they want to see promotion of Catholic education projects. And these projects are happening throughout the country, thank God, in lots of different ways, with teenagers, with adults, in lots of parishes throughout the country. And we see a very successful start to this new independent classical education movement, having started already in Cork. So the Mater Dei Secondary School really helped to inspire our project as well, and we wish them well, because they've really opened up the way for these schools to start around the country now. So they're doing
Yeah.
great work in that secondary school down there. And also there'll be a new classical primary school starting off in Cork as well, please God. So we're hoping for more of these to start off around the country. And thank God, a number of religious organizations have been in contact with us as well, and we've been in contact with them, and they're looking to support us in whatever way they can. So we're very thankful to them, and please God, we'll work together for the renewal of Catholic education in this project.
You're in Limerick City, is that right?
Limerick City, yeah.
So if anybody is interested in either maybe looking at the possibility of enrolling their children with you or supporting you in other ways, how can they get in contact?
Yeah, so the website of the school will be set up shortly. We're just finishing up setting up our bank details, so we'll be putting that live hopefully towards the end of the month or the start of July. But in the meantime, until you can access us at stellamarisprimaryschool.com, that'll be our website, then just please email me at info@stellamarisprimaryschool.com, and I'll put you on a mailing list so that you'll be able to find out when the website goes live. You'll be able to find out more information. Parents will be able to find out information about enrollments, and people who are looking to help us to fund us will be able to donate on that platform as well. That's something that's very important as well, Michael, because we are an independent classical school. We're not financed by the government. We're completely dependent upon donations. We're going to shortly get our charity status from the charity regulator, and so every donation that comes to us is very much appreciated and will greatly help to to promote the renewal of Catholic education in our school, in Stella Maris School.
Well, I don't want to butcher the quote, but so, for it's a long time ago. It's mens sanum in corpore sanum. You're in Limerick, so before you go, presumably at some stage you'll hope to get some hurling and some rugby into these children as well.
I know, yeah. It's certainly the hurling's going very well for Limerick at the moment. It's always the heartland of rugby as well. So certainly, yeah, as we didn't even mention all the various subjects, but PE will obviously be one of the subjects that we teach as well in the school, because we're looking to help children develop academically, spiritually, and humanly as well, which involves the important teaching of physical education.
Particularly to Tipperary men on a good day. Listen, uh, Richard, thanks a million for talking to us. I hope I'll ask Adrian afterwards if he could maybe we'll put that link in there in the section below this. So if anybody wants to get in contact you, yeah, at Stella Maris, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank the people who are out there for coming in again. Hit the old subscribe button, hit the donate button. Anything you can will be used to support those life issues that we all share and we all value. But for this evening, I thank you. And maybe when it's up and running, we'll come back and we'll have a chat about seeing how it's going. And maybe for the day when it's going, you've set up your primary school, you'll be going on to your secondary school, uh, Del Valente, as they say. Anyway, thank you very
Please,
much.
God. Thanks very much, Michael. God bless you. Thank you.